Oh, not long to go now. Well, evening, everybody. Hope you're well. How's your day been? It's Thursday, which means tomorrow's the best day of the week, Friday. So, hope you're all okay. It's obviously a solo webinar this evening, so it's just me. So I'm going to be in charge of myself and I, the slides, the content, and the comments. So please pop your questions in the comments, and I obviously will get to my own questions at the end of my presentation this evening. Before we get underway this evening, I suppose a few more general things and bits and bobbins. How have you found Operation Respond 2025? As I've been telling you all week, this is our third year. So this idea that I had back in 2023 that we needed to work out how we were going to respond. I think at the time we were told we were in recession, and I wanted everyone to think about how they're going to respond to that rather than just go along with whatever was going to come our way, how we were going to have a plan in place. And so we had 5 nights of webinars in 2023. We did the same in 2024. So how have you found this year's Operation Respond? Have you enjoyed it? Have you managed to implement or put on a jobs list anything you've heard this week? We've had everything, haven't we? From last night, we were talking about dry runs, thinking about emergency plans and how we would, deal with X, Y, and Z if the worst was to happen. We have been hearing from Jane about numbers and the importance of knowing our numbers and knowing how to get the maths to tell us what's happening. And we've heard from Rachel regarding the reforms that are coming our way and how prepared we need to be in our settings. So have you got anything from this week of webinars? I hope you have. I hope you'll go back and watch the recordings. Thank you, everybody who has been posting repeat when they've watched it on replay. Thank you for that. That's so useful to know. And yes, I hope you've got some benefit from it. But, and in all seriousness, the reason this is worthwhile is because of the feedback we get from you guys. So if you have found it useful, if you can spend 20 seconds leaving us a comment, whether it be on this video or on the Facebook group or anywhere, so that we can see it, to say that you found it useful and what you've particularly enjoyed, it just gives us a reason to put it on again another year, doesn't it? So all I can ask is for you to do that and be able to then communicate with myself and my fellow people who volunteered their time this week to see whether you found it of benefit, so that we know whether you want us to put it on again. So tonight it's all about me, and I thought I'd give you 5 ways to save money in your employment practices. So could have done an employment law update, but I thought, hey, let's do this. Let's do something a bit different. And then if you've got any questions on anything you think might come into my world of expertise, chuck it at the back end and chuck it on the comments, and we'll come to it at the back end and hopefully be able to answer your questions. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So just introduce who I am for those of you who are new to Operation Respond. We are virtually on 600 members of this Facebook group. We've had lots of people register for Operation Respond this year who hadn't previously been registered, so that's fantastic. So if you haven't met me before and you don't know who this woman is who's put on Operation Respond in 2025, this is I. I am the proud owner of Red Wing Solutions. We are the UK's largest HR consultancy that specialises in day nurseries, preschools and groups. We operate from a converted cowshed in rural Worcestershire, and we are looking after nurseries, preschools and clubs across the UK, so England, Scotland and Wales. We will take anyone's money, so we've got some other businesses that we look after, everything from the local funeral directors to some manufacturing organisations, retailers, people that tend to have in some way or another a nursery connection, and that's how we've got their business, as you might imagine. But we love what we do. We're a team of 9, we'll be 10 at the end of the month. We're very, very fortunate to work at the best job in the world, which is HR, and never let anyone tell you any different. So if you need HR for your day nursery, preschool or club, do give us a chat, do have a chat with us, and do look up on our website to see if there's anything on there that would benefit you and your setting. So I think in terms of an understatement, shall we say, the chances are it's going to be a challenging year. It would be fair to say about 2025. We've already been given advance warning at several points during the back end of 2024. I think starting really with the announcement that we were going to have a general election in the summer rather than at the end of the Parliament, which would have been December. I think once that happened, I think we all knew it was going to be a challenging year because everyone had said before the general election that there'll be a change of government here. There's going to be a change. There's going to be a change of colour. And it's happened many times in my lifetime, many times in my working time. So I guess it wasn't that necessarily I found daunting. But we knew it was going to be a challenge because whenever there's a change of colour, whenever we go blue as a country, we get more laws that aid employers. Whenever we go red as a country, we get more laws that aid employees. So it was always going to be a challenging year, and it hasn't let us down so far. We had a manifesto to look through, didn't we? When we were making our decisions on who to vote for. And Labour put a lot of information out about how to make work pay. So their manifesto document and then their plan to put that, when they got into government, to put that manifesto into action was very much public communicated. It was very much shared with us as to these are the intentions. And the benefit of that is that people far brighter than me get a chance to analyse this list of changes that are going to be brought in by a new government and suggest ways in which employers are going to need to work with that change. And the beauty of that is you get advanced warning. You get that thought through process of if this was to be brought in, it would mean why. And that's definitely been happening ever since July 2024. And it's only going to get greater. It's very much, a question of the information's out there. We've just got to understand what it's going to mean. The benefit is that as a person in society, we get this information very readily now. We've got the internet. What it can sometimes feel is that the civil servants who are writing these legislations and deciding on what's going to be law don't necessarily understand how businesses work. So there can be this big disjoint. And I think if we were to look at the Employment Rights Bill, which is one of the big pieces of legislation that's going to come out of the change in government, I think it's truth to say that a lot of that seems to have been not necessarily thought through as to how that's going to work in practice. And that's going to give us some of the challenges this year, but not just this year, next year too. So we did have the Employment Rights Bill, which we were told which would be introduced within 100 days of the new government being formed. And I think it arrived on day 97. So they were true to their word. This is a large bill. It runs into 50 odd pages. And very quickly, they realised they needed to give fact sheets. So if you go onto the Google search engine of everything and ask it for fact sheets on the Employment Rights Bill, there are about 7 or 8 different fact sheets that the government has put out to try and explain what is difficult to understand when you look at the bill. For me, if law was as straightforward as fact sheets, we wouldn't need both. But hey-ho, it is what it is. So we've got this Employment Rights Bill that will become the Employment Rights Act 2025. Really annoys me that because we've got an Employment Rights Act 1996. So why couldn't they have given it a different name? But we will have a new Employment Rights Act in 2025. And it will incorporate all of the elements that we've already spoken about. So it's a huge piece of legislation. Some of it will come quickly, some of it will come over the next 2 years. And we're talking 2 years from the October 2024 sort of announcement of the bill to October 2026. So here's a pause for thought. One of the big things that we are told that the Employment Rights Bill will bring will be the right to day one unfair dismissal claims for people that you employ. Here's the thing to get your head round. As I said to you a few minutes ago, we are 9 employees now, 10 to be at the end of the month. Our new starter will not need to wait until end of January 2027, 2 years' time, in order to have employment rights from day one. She will have those rights way before then, because they will come into government. Government will introduce them, into the UK way before then. We think at the latest in October 26. So everyone you employ now doesn't need to have 2 years service to be able to claim unfair dismissal against you, because it will come in during the next 2 years. So there's something to think about. This is a massive change. It's going to present massive challenges. It's a big reason why I would say to every provider watching this, whether it's live or on record, think about how you're going to save money in your employment practices when we've got things like this coming down the line, which are going to cost you money. And then at the end of October, so we had the Employment Rights Bill, middle of October. The end of October, we had the budget. And again, we were told with the budget, certain things were going to change. We were told that the rate of national insurance that we pay would go upwards. And I think it was suggested it was a leak, but I think it was very much the information was put out there so that we were pre-warned. So when the budget is announced and Rachel stands up and talks about national insurance for employers, there was no great surprise by the level. There was a massive surprise when she said, and she'll reduce the threshold of when you start paying it down to £5,100. So those sort of things, £5,000 from 9,100. That was not thought to change. So that was a massive, massive shock, which has obviously brought more people into the payrolls who we pay national insurance for. So we've had the budget, we've had, that day in October, and we now know from April the 1st what we're going to be paying out. And you'll have seen me go live at the end of October. So I was talking about the national minimum wage again, which had been leaked. We knew what the rates were going to be a couple of days before the budget. Those are the rates that we've got to face for April. The percentage increases are bigger than we've had. The age banding is shrinking. Government seem to be very much intent that workers will receive the same flat rate of national minimum wage, totally disregarding that no employer wants to pay a 16-year-old the same as a 21-year-old. And what this will do to youth unemployment, God only knows. So it'll make it much more likely that somebody will pass over hiring somebody at 18 to 20 who has minimal experience when they're going to pay the same hourly rate to somebody who is 44 and has got 20 years plus of work behind them. So this was me at the end of October trying to explain what the Employment Rights Bill and the budget meant for us as employers. And you remember a lot to talk about a spreadsheet, which I'm still giving out today. You can tell it's Halloween because of my headdress. Don't normally walk around with a spider on my head. But we obviously were very keen for you to look at the spreadsheet from a perspective of now, what your costs were now, what your costs for all of your employees in your setting, what your what you would be paying a week for someone's wages, what that would mean for a year for your wage bill, what it would the impact of the national insurance being the levels they are now, and then the national insurance levels being different from the 1st of April 2025, and obviously any minimum wage impact changes as well from the 1st of April 2025. I'm really glad that many of you have found that useful to just give yourself a figure which says what the difference is going to be for your businesses. So my first of 5 things for you to take away and look at to try and save money in your employment practices in 2025 is this question of review your accountants. Now, I'm sure there's not a business watching this that hasn't got an accountant, whether it is somebody for whom the relationship is very formal or somebody for whom the relationship is very informal. Having an accountant to hand to be able to help navigate what is a very much a minefield in doing the right thing and being legal and not doing something you're not allowed to do is very, very good at business advice. And we tend to only change our accountants when we fall out with them. So it's a bit like your bank. Your bank can do a lot with you. You'll still stick with them because the pain of moving banks is perceived to be greater than putting up with what you've got. And it's the same with accountants. The idea of moving accountant, when's the right time? What's the new people going to require of me? What sort of time have I got set aside for that? What would the relationship be like if I told them that I wasn't very happy? Would that then affect how they did the work that I've already paid for them to do? There's lots of questions that go around. But the thing with accountants is they aren't all created equal. Now, every accountant should be capable of providing employers who are watching this with software that helps them to create their monthly management accounts. And my advice to you would be read those profit and loss reports each month, those monthly management accounts, even if it makes you feel sick. Because without knowing your profit, without knowing your losses, you cannot make any decisions in your business. Therefore, it's the first of 5 ways to save money in your employment practices, because you've got to know your numbers. Without that, you are literally running around in the dark. You really need to know your monthly management accounts. And one of the things we hear is people say to people like myself and other suppliers who they're looking to have a relationship with, can't tell you whether we can afford your services until my accountant tells me what my profit this year has been. No, no, no. You need to be telling your accountant what your profit has been this month, rather than you waiting for your accountant to tell you at the end of 12 month plus, when they've done the accounts for the year, what profit you made last year. You can't make decisions based on what you did last year, next year. You need to be able to make them month by month. So you need this information, and a good piece of software like Xero or QuickBooks, not that I'm particularly affiliated to either of those, is essential going forward. You can't run your business off an Excel spreadsheet in 2025. It's no longer going to be fit for purpose. So you need to know your numbers. This is why we need to look at our accountant and ask ourselves, are they giving us enough information to know our numbers? Are they able to tell you whether you are overstaffed or understaffed? Are they, yes, they won't necessarily understand ratios, but are they telling you that what your percentage of your income is going on your wage bill? And are they able to give you an indication as to whether that is too high, about right, too low? Are you trying to run with too little staff, which could be an issue? Are they able to give you an indicator as to whether your expenses are going up in a particular area? And do they consider that to be, again, what they would expect, not what they would expect? Can they give you ideas and ways in which the fee that they ask you to pay could be paid for by the savings they can help you make? And again, these are the sort of conversations you need a quality accountant to do that. So your first step is to review your accountant. If you're not happy, see if there's someone else in your local area or even on a national basis. As I say, not all accountants are created equal. You get what you pay for. They should be able to generate enough savings for you so that it's a cost neutral transaction. That's what the good ones always tell you. And they should be able to provide you with that proactive advice rather than that end of year, I've done your filings for you relationship, which is very much hands off. Don't talk to us. We're not involved in your business. You want somebody who's going to say, this isn't normal for you, Betty, or, what's going on, Fred? We can help. We've got some ideas. That's what you really want in 2025. And it is money, I truly believe, well spent. Outsource your payroll provider. Well, the reason I mention this one, if your accountant is doing your payroll, there is a very good chance you are paying over the odds for your payroll. Payroll is one of those areas that I have jokingly said for many, many years, at least 20 years, that I have dodged being responsible for payroll. I don't even do my own payroll. In HR, you often get given other jobs, and health and safety and payroll were two of the jobs that commonly when you're internal HR, you get given or you get asked to take responsibility for. I've always managed to be out of the room when someone was giving out payroll, and I will continue to be out of the room because I am not payroll. Payroll is not my bag. Numbers are not my thing. And so I can totally understand why people outsource their payroll. It seems complicated. Payroll people will tell you it's complicated. It's something you want to make sure you get done right. Having people come to you and say my pay isn't right would be the worst moment ever. So lots of us outsource our payroll, but don't outsource it to an accountant who has got years and years of qualifications and in management accounts, in auditing, and all the different aspects of accountancy to do your payroll, because I swear to you, you'll pay over the odds. Now, I've popped in the files today, a charitable organisation in Gloucestershire who run their own preschools and provide a payroll service, not just to themselves, but to other organisations in the sector and possibly other outside of the sector organisations who need an outsourced payroll. They're very cost effective. You're putting money back into the sector. So again, it's if you think about the money, the pound you're spending, you're spending it in the right way. It's as I say, a really good way to save money with your accountant is to ask them to specifically provide you one service and not to provide you services you can get cheaper elsewhere. So if you are looking for an option, as I say, they don't charge VAT, DPATA. They'll provide you with a payroll service. You've got a basic option or a more enhanced option that includes the pensions. Typical prices for 10 employees would be around about £124 a month. Ultimately, you to get that, you would obviously have everything taken care of. You get all your reports done, your P60s, everything's included. And obviously all you have to do is put the money that they've told you that person is due into the account. So that's what the transfer part is. That's all you would have to do. So my advice would be, first of all, review your accountant relationship and look and see whether you can get better value for money with the service you're paying for. And that may mean outsourcing to a payroll provider. If you're going to make mistakes with payroll, that's another cost saving as well. Review your terms and conditions is number 2. Very much, I suppose, pertinent to 2025 is that we will have a need to look at our terms and conditions now rather than later because of the Employment Rights Bill. And I'll come to that in a bit more detail momentarily. So it's very common to get what we call terms and conditions creep. And this is where over time, you're looking at ways to motivate the team, and so you end up giving, as an employer, additional terms and conditions when ultimately the benefit you're getting from those additional terms and conditions will not be the same as the benefit you got originally when you introduced them in. So, for example, holiday days can go up because you decide, well, actually, let's see if we can do this and let's see if we can do that, and let's see whether that then motivates the team and we get benefits from it. And suddenly you have people with no service getting very generous holiday entitlements for which there has been no incremental exchange between the parties. So my first advice to you is to review your terms and conditions and look to see whether any of your conditions have crept in a way that you're actually now thinking that doesn't work for us. So you'll find organisations have got things like, out of touch bonuses and benefits that just do not directly impact the behaviours that you see in the setting and the outcomes for children. So can you change some of those so that they actually do ultimately lead to better outcomes? Do you lead to sort of better quality childcare rather than just be you've been here therefore you get X? Can you continue to avoid certain T's and C's? I mean, that's in terms of a strategy. Is certain things that you don't do able to be avoided using in the future? Can you perhaps recognize that there's a different way of doing something? Are you and your team getting good value? I mean, if a T&C has included, I don't know, £50 a year for first aid accreditation or something like that, and that's now something everybody is doing, everybody is first aid trained, you might say, well, actually, paying that £50 doesn't make any sense. We might as well just what we call, pay a consideration to the contract and buy somebody out of that terms and conditions, so that going forward you haven't got that expense. And that's quite possible. You might have given somebody gym membership, or you might have given somebody paid time off for a particular duty that you now want to vary their terms and conditions and have them working in a different capacity rather than the way it's been done. Admin hours and things like that, is that working for you? Or actually, is it a question somebody gets paid for 6 hours and does 2 hours? Yeah, could that be an option? Are there alternatives to the terms and conditions that are not pay related, that are non-cash, that you could do? So, could you get some benefits of doing something that would give the staff member a non-cash benefit that you could then offset in a different way with your accountant, rather than have what you've previously done, which was to pay them the benefit as a bonus. They get taxed, you get taxed. It doesn't help anybody in the slightest. There was an alternative you haven't explored that you could explore. So there's lots of things that I would suggest to you to look at when it comes to reviewing your terms and conditions. And the reason you need to do this now is because we're going to get to a stage, because of the Employment Rights Bill, where you're not going to easily be able to vary the terms and conditions of your staff. So you'll have heard when the Employment Rights Bill came out, we talked a lot about something called fire and rehire. And again, I said at the beginning, the civil servants don't necessarily know what they've written, but they've written into the bill that we will ban fire and rehire because of what happened at P&O Ferries. And everyone can tell you that that was a big shock. We woke up one morning to find P&O Ferries had stacked the workforce in order to replace them with a cheaper workforce. And nobody would say that that was a good idea. Nobody would say that their morals were intact that day when they did that. But the net effect of trying to avoid a P&O Ferries is to ban every employer from being able to vary the terms and conditions, because they've said that if you object to it, it's unfair. So that situation is going to make it really tricky to get people to agree to a consideration in exchange for changing their terms and conditions. It's going to make it really tricky to say, I'm going to need you to go from doing this work to this work, because if they say no, it's automatically unfair. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. So you need to get in place variation plans now. So if you are sat there at home thinking, I need to vary my terms and conditions of my staff, talk to your HR firm, whoever it is, whether it's us or someone else. Talk to us now. Make it a priority for first quarter 2025 for you to have those conversations. Please do not kick this can down the road, because if you've got T&C creep, if you've got terms and conditions you need to stop doing because you can't afford it anymore, you need to say to the staff, look, hands up, we are in this situation. This is what we need to do about it. Don't wait for that to happen, because you'll lose the right when the government introduces the stopping of fire and rehire. And my understanding, my colleague Amy were looking at this last week, is the government doesn't need to introduce secondary legislation for this part of the Employment Rights Bill. Enough is in place, in layman's language, for this to be announced as coming in 1st of June. I'm not saying it would come in on the 1st of June. I don't think laws have ever come in on the 1st of June, but say that's what they wanted to do. Nothing would stop that happening. We do not need to pass additional legislation. Once the Employment Rights Bill gets royal assent, anything could happen at any time in relation to that element. Not with all, but in relation to that element. Okay. My next slide is, so if you are not using 12.07% of hours worked for your part year and irregular hours contracts, you will want to consider it now. Now, I'm not saying you'll want to do it, but you'll want to consider it, because what we have worked out that for some settings, paying 12.7% of hours worked is a cost saving. Okay, so if you've been doing it in the way that we had to do it when we lost 12.07%, let's put it in that way because we did lose it, we had to use the terms for temp time staff. We had to take the number of hours, number of weeks they worked in a year, so let's say 38, and add 5.6 weeks holiday to it. We had no other range of options to use. We now, from April 1st, 2024, have the option that where the holiday year is after the 1st of April 2024, which everybody's holiday year I would expect to be now, we are in a situation where you have that flexibility to use 12.07% for your part year and irregular hours contracts. So if you've got term time only people and they are part year workers, you might want to think about whether you want to move to 12.07% if you could save some money on the holiday pay element. If you do, you'll need to consult with the workforce. You'll need to talk to them about obviously what they are receiving in terms of their terms and conditions now and what you'd be proposing they would move to. You'd need to consult them and take their views on board, depending on the length of service. If they have 2 years service, we'd be more concerned about obviously the risk of constructive dismissal if you force through the variations. We'd want to try and take them with us. But ultimately, we would be having the option to move them to this new contract with obviously due attention to the consultation process. For your regular hours contracts, that's your 0 hours, your bank staff, your staff that might have variable hours contracts, so they might work different hours, each week or during the month. They may have certain times when they're working more than others. And again, if you're using a different calculator than 12.07%, you might want to think about doing that. And we're not losing the right to use 0 hours contracts going forward. A lot of people are suggesting that that's what Labour wanted, but actually they wanted to ban exploitative 0 hour contracts. So they're still here to stay. There will be rules around it, but that's for another day. You do want to ask yourself whether 12.07% of hours worked could help you now before the fire and rehire arrives. And another one under T's and C's is enhanced disclosure from DBS. My advice would be, since the law prices changed, I think it was the 2nd of December, wasn't it? Monday the 2nd of December, the prices from DBS went up. Everyone's checks will have gone up from that Monday. Shop around for your enhanced disclosures and consider changing your terms and conditions to state that obviously the employee will pay for the DBS. And the reason why that's a saving is because obviously we have employees that are on or near the national minimum wage. We have to be careful about whether we require them to pay for something that would take them below the national minimum wage. But we know that the enhanced disclosure, because it benefits the individual, is exempt from it being a deduction that can take somebody below the minimum wage. So if somebody left you within the probationary period, and when I mean left, I mean resigned, quit, not that you pushed them or that they were made redundant, but they chose to go, then I think the argument that you require them to pay their DBS is a far easier argument to make than obviously you say, right, okay, if I'm going to take you on, you've got to pay for this disclosure. I can see why that's going to be prohibitive to recruitment and retention if you're going to adopt that strategy. But you are in a position where you can look at varying that, but do it this side of fire and rehire disappearing. And my final on the area of terms and conditions is, do I need staff uniform? Now, I do appreciate I've given you a picture of a child sat in his nappy, but, and I'm not suggesting your staff sit in their underwear or work in their underwear as a strategy, particularly not in this weather. It's a bit too parky for that sort of behaviour. What I'm saying is that uniforms have always been problematic when it comes to the national minimum wage, and far too many employers of all sectors, whether they are restaurants, hotels, day nurseries, have found themselves the wrong side of a national minimum wage inquiry because of their demands for people to wear certain items of clothing that they've had to buy for themselves, and therefore the HMRC have been convinced that it's reduced their pay, not directly but indirectly, for national minimum wage purposes. One of the ways we can save money is to not make everybody wear the same clothes. There are other HR benefits to allowing individualism. Not everybody looks good in an orange polo shirt. Not everybody wants to wear fitted trousers or smart work trousers. For some people, their body shape, their body image does not make that a comfortable piece of workwear. They want the flexibility to be free, to be able to wear clothing that reflects their personality, their body type, what makes them comfortable, what makes them the best version of themselves. And I think a lot of studies have been around the sort of the psychology of work, and what really has driven a lot of people to be reluctant to join organisations where they would work with other people and have to obviously go to a place of work rather than, sit on a telephone answering a phone calls from their back bedroom at home. Now, some of it is down to the uniform. So, is to 2025 the year to ask ourselves the question of, do I see any reason to keep youth staff uniforms, or is there another way in which we can be protecting people's clothes, if that's one of the reasons we have a uniform, to protect their clothes, or to be able to have a brand image that we're all proud to be part of. So there's other ways in which you can do that without it being a uniform, and there's lots of things to discuss there. So if you do want to think about removing staff uniforms, and you've got any sort of I suppose thoughts you have on what you could have as an alternative, then do reach out to us and have a chat with somebody about the options that are available and how people are seeing the benefits of not having a staff uniform at this point in time in history. Review your roles. So that's not the same as reviewing your T's and C's. So this is really taking the view of, how are we going to employ people? What are we going to do when people leave? Because they naturally will. How are we going to replace those roles? Is it going to be like for like? If somebody left that was full-time, that was working Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day, are we going to replace them with somebody who's Monday to Friday? Or are we going to replace them with somebody who does 4 long days, who does 10-hour days, and therefore has a work-life balance because they don't work one of the days a week? Will we find we have a greater pool of candidates if we did offer the role this way, and then we would the other way? One of the theorists that I remember a lot is a gentleman called Atkinson, and I'm going to share his model in a moment. But just take the view that what worked then won't work now when it comes to roles. We've definitely got to respond to the times in 2025. We've definitely got to, I think, be open to different perspectives as to what might work, and therefore save us money, because there's going to be lots of people trying to make demands on our money. When we do spend money, I want us to spend it well. So Atkinson's flexible firm model from 1984, so 40 years ago last year. He taught us that you have to think about a core workforce, a core group. So that was probably in nurseries would be your full-timers, your permanent full-timers. Outside of that circle would be your peripheral group number 1, which would be made up of part-timers, people on fixed-term contracts, people for whom there may well be a slightly less permanent relationship to your core. And then outside of that, you've got your agency, your contractors, your self-employed people, and people for whom you buy a service of as and when you need it. So your IT firms, your telephone suppliers, people, your milk deliverers, those sort of people for whom there is a supply relationship. They provide you with a service, but you don't have employees because of that, or any of those sort of relationships. And one of our clients, they looked, using the spreadsheet that I mentioned to you that we did on Halloween, they took 2 scenarios and asked themselves the question, if we've got one full-timer doing 30 hours a week now on the national minimum wage, what's going to be the impact if we've got 2 part-timers doing 15 hours each on the national minimum wage from the 1st of April? And what they worked out was quite interesting. So by having 2 15-hour people, term time only, compared to having 1 30-hour person in April. So if they say they got, when they got the spreadsheet, they've got 3 lines, 2 15s, 1 30. The 1 30 would cost you a 1 figure, but the 2 15-hour people would give you a saving of around about £80 a year. So nothing great, nothing to necessarily write home about. There are additional costs of having more people on the head count because of things like training, in particular, it's an expense, which obviously means that could easily be swamped. But in terms of going forward, you can't, I don't believe, as employers, and I'm in the same situation, I can't make any decisions about cost without running the numbers first. So the spreadsheet makes me look and see whether the saving is of an attractive nature or it's just a figure nature. You have to know, don't you? You have to run the numbers to find that out. So what I advise in terms of review your roles in 2025 is to to know whether you are better off having somebody come and clean your nursery for 15 hours a week, who is an independent, outsourced, not on the payroll local contractor, or whether it's better to pay for somebody to stay a few hours a week at the end of their a few hours a day at the end of their day, who's already got a job for someone else or got a job with you. What is going to be the best way for you to get that action solved? Is it to hire directly, as Atkinson would describe as being in a core role, or to have them on a more temporary basis, a more flexible basis, or even outsource them? Unless you've run the numbers, you just don't know. So we need to know our full-time equivalent, as according to Jane on Tuesday, in relation to our occupancy. We also need to know our full-time equivalent in relation to our staff workforce. And just because you've got 17 staff doesn't mean to say you've got 17 full-time staff. So know what those figures and numbers are. And my big metric to know in terms of your roles is know your turnover by employee, and that's full-time equivalent employee, and track to see whether that's at a level that you find acceptable. Because again, if you're an indicator of what you're doing is the fact you're making more money, or you're turning over more money because of you having more staff members. So it's really important to understand that metric. And can you use more flexible options and still comply with reforms coming to safe recruitment? You know, one of the big questions we're going to have is, how are we going to manage when we've got to wait for references? Is that going to mean that we're going to end up having more agency personnel? Are we going to end up having to cover, and Sue and I were talking about this, you know, these cover somebody's late start because we haven't got a reference back with an agency staff member that is very quickly going to cost us a huge amount more money than if we'd have been able to start that person when we originally planned. So these things need to be thought about, because those reforms, they're not part of the Employment Rights Bill. They're coming because of revisions in England to the EYFS in September. So ask yourself, what's your organisational structure and does it work? They do say, and this is slightly off topic, they do say we should have two organisational structures at any one time. We should have the one we have now that reflects our reality, and the one that we're working towards. Yeah. And again, find the time to do that, and your future self will thank you, because it's a very illustrative piece of work. And it leads on to our last one as well. Is the organisational structure you've got working for you? Is it what you want? Because if my future organisational structure is vastly different, I need to be taking steps towards that now, don't I? Particularly before we get more employment rights coming in. Do I have everyone fully engaged in the work I need doing right now? You know, have you kicked down the can down the road when it comes to performance with anybody? Again, big question. Ask yourself it quietly. Do I have the right hours covered by the right people at the right time? Have I got what I want, or am I trying to make do with what I've got? Yeah, these are the big things we need to think about to save money in our settings in 2025. Number 4, review your talent. Okay, so this one is where we're thinking about, where would your workforce sit on this scale? So this is a Johari window. You've probably seen them a million times before. We have got will along the bottom, and will in this context is obviously somebody's motivation, their commitment, how they show up on a regular day, what sort of person they are when they show up. Do they show up enthused to do the work that they can do, or are they reluctant to leave the comfort of their home and come to work for you every day? That's the one axis. And you've got high further along, and you've got low down on the bottom left-hand corner behind my head. And then you've got on this axis skill. And obviously you will have people for whom, if you're going to populate this drawing, you would be putting them in this box here. So, hello. You'd be putting them up here, top right. I don't think I've got a pointer, so I don't think I can point. But you would definitely be up here. Top right, they would be high skill, high will. They're going to be a thinking performers in HR language. They're going to be your best assets. They're going to be the people that you most have invested in, the people who you can rely upon, that when your back's turned and they see a job, they've got it done. Those folk, those superstars that I wrote about back in 2015. You've also potentially got people who haven't got much skills, but they've got a lot of potential. They're high will, but low skill. They'd be down here. So this box, so that would be bottom right, as you're looking at the slide. Typically, people put their apprentices in there, particularly in January, because if the apprentice only started in September, they're only a few months into their career in early years. They haven't yet developed the skills to be high, but they're still loving it. They found their dream job. They're happier than they've ever been before. They're earning and learning. They're getting to work with children. They're coming up with lovely first experiences, taking the children out on a snow walk, doing snow angels. They've not experienced those things before. It's a first. It's thrilling. It's all going in the right direction, but the skills haven't yet come. And when that apprentice graduates and becomes a qualified practitioner, you'd hope they'd go from being high will and low skill to being high will, high skill. Over here, you could have people who are highly qualified and it's a real drag to try and get them to do anything. Yes, so they are low will, high skill. And these are the people for whom they may have been high will, high skill, but they kept seeing people who, got away with things, so they decided to join them. Yeah. And this is a topic that we're going to hear me talk a lot about this year, which is the risk that people are seeing you not addressing other people's performance at work, and therefore deciding to take matters into their own hand and perhaps removing their will from the relationship that once existed. So for me, this is just such a waste of money and so frustrating. And with these people, you're spending a lot of money on their training development, these people down the bottom. These people are amazing. They're trained, they're willing, they want to do everything, they're great. But if you don't look after them, they'll leave, because the people who leave aren't the people in the bottom left of this diagram, or even in the top left of this diagram. Those aren't necessarily the people who you lose. You lose your thinking performers to other people who can offer them better terms and conditions, more equitable terms and conditions, things that suit them better right now, that perhaps aren't out of date like your old T's and C's were, that they've moved with the times, they're a new setting, they're a new chain, they've got new ideas. You will lose your good people to them, not your bad people. And therefore more of your good people will think, oh, I've got no staff now, as well become less willful and less committed and just be in this box. So this is a big one. You've got to review your roles and look at your talent. So 4 is review your talent, 3 is look at your roles. And my advice to you would be, get good paperwork great. Now, this is a big theme for Red Wing in 2025. If you have not been performance managing your team, you're going to need to get good at it and get good at it quickly, because the pain of having people who are getting away with not doing their job is going to be a pain that you experience now, but you're going to experience it greater in the future. I can assure you of that. And it's going to cost you more money in the future. Remember when we're having our hands tied by government changing legislation, every step we make to try and navigate that is more costly than it was when we did it before the legislation changed. So we've got to take on board the need to get good practices now. So reviewing your probationary periods, making sure that the practice in there of not letting standards slip, that you then have to address. I'll give you an example. I spoke to somebody not so long ago who was telling me who they had somebody who'd started and they were late virtually every day, but it wasn't a problem because they'd had a smaller number of children join. So they'd had their summer leavers, and those summer leavers hadn't been replaced. So whilst they came in late, it wasn't putting them out of ratio. It wasn't something they felt it was an urgent need to address. So it wasn't a huge pain point. But the problem was that person had been doing it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and nobody had said anything. So the day they then do say something, that person goes off like a rocket and says, well, it was fine all these other weeks. Why is it not fine today? Don't understand, confused, all of the above. Now, I'm not saying their reaction was right, because it shouldn't have been. They should have known that if their contract was to start at 8, you start at 8, you don't start at 1:15. But I do have some sympathy that they've been allowed to get away with the behaviour, so therefore they think it's acceptable. They would be then surprised when they're told it's unacceptable. We can't kick the can down the road with performance. anymore. We've got to be honest with people and say to people, just need to ask, obviously, why you're not here on time. Is there any difficulty that you haven't told me regarding your commute? Find out what their situations. If it's their trains, if it's their buses, have they got other people that they can ask to help them out on those days? Have they got an idea as to whether this is going to be something that improves in the short term, in the long term? What can you do as an organisation to meet them in the middle, if anything at all, not being compelled to go fetch them? But them understanding that this could be an issue. This could be an issue because I've employed you to start at this time, therefore you can't start at that time. So having that understanding is really important, not approving them and confirming them as completing their probationary period and then coming to somebody 6 weeks down the road and saying, I need to get rid of this person. And we were saying, but you've just confirmed them as completing their probationary period. That's mixed messaging. You might get away with that in 2024. You won't necessarily get away with it in 2025 and 2026. So you've got to change your habits and your behaviours now. My last one before we do questions is review your HR, because your HR that supports you in your settings needs to be working for you. It needs to be working with you and needs to be working for you to ensure that you're getting great value. Now, this isn't an advert to come to Red Wing. Obviously, you're more than welcome to ask us for a price. But please, this is an advert to avoid costly mistakes, because the cost of rectifying something that could have been prevented is far, far greater than the cost of putting in place what was needed in order for that mistake to happen. So let's talk sexual harassment. People say, oh, it's never going to happen in day nurseries. It does. We've had cases of sexual harassment in day nurseries every year, without fail. It happens. It's not a unique experience to other people. We're going to need to make sure going forward with the new legislation that we got at the end of October that we avoid those costly mistakes by being able to demonstrate that we've taken all reasonable steps. Sorting out something now might cost you a few £100s, but it could save you tens of thousands of pounds later on down the road. So it's about making sure with your HR you've really thought through as to what can we do as a spend today, a small spend, to avoid a much larger spend later on. And I suppose that ties into what Rory was telling us last night. It's that failure to prepare is prepared to fail, which I'm sure, as in being a serviceman, he would have heard many, many times before. But he talked about dry runs, didn't he? He talked about, not making a mistake when it mattered. Therefore, the effort that went into making sure something was practiced and perfected when it wasn't in a live situation. We need to be the same with our HR. Can you get stuff in place now to avoid a cost later? That, for me, is very important. So in terms of how we can help you, if you do need any HR support, you can reach out and have some support. We do a discovery call so that you can obviously have a chat with us, and you can obviously by ad hoc time, you can have a little as a 20-minute call if you need. So if you need to have that with one of our team, and that's obviously really important to us that you've got that facility. Now, we are doing Operation Respond as the sister product of the Nursery Owners Summit, which is coming to Nottingham on the 13th of June. Yes, it is Friday the 13th. No, we hadn't thought it through. But we are coming to Nottingham in June. We are back at the Village Hotel, for whom they hosted us perfectly in Leeds in June 2024. And therefore, the opportunity to stay with the same hotel group came up, and for us to move location. And that's what we've decided to do. Now, as people who have participated in Operation Respond, we have got a special offer for you. So we've took some money off a ticket. I think we took about £9 or so off a ticket, 10%, just for you, just for January. So between now and the 31st of January, if you buy your ticket for Nursery Owners Summit, which is Jane and I's one-day nursery managers summit, where we bring you all together with guest speakers and headline speakers. We've got headline sponsors of Christie & Co this year. We've got headline speaker of Alice, who you'll know, and is just an amazing turn, Alice Sharp. She's going to be our key speaker, and she's going to be speaking on the day. What we need to make sure you know is that Nursery Owners Summit is going to be very much about the purpose we have. So it's, yes, there's elements of business, and yes, there's elements of making sure that we understand funding and how to be savvy as nursery owners, but also that we do so without losing sense of why we set up these settings in the first place, or why we work in settings. So it is going to all be about being the children at the heart of what we do. And so if you're a caring individual and your first love is childcare and educating young children and providing them with the best possible start, then you can get lots of ideas from the Nursery Owners Summit, because it's not about forgetting all about the children and focusing on the numbers. It's about remaining child centres, but yet business owners who know their numbers, who are able to make good decisions for the future of their settings and therefore the outcomes of future children, because they've got a grasp on these things. So I'd really encourage you to come along. Tickets are on sale. The link on the screen, the QR code, will take you directly to the website where you will get the offer until the 31st of January. So if you know you can make it, you and your managers, you are more than welcome to come along. And over the next few months, you'll see us talking about all the good things that we're going to be able to share with you about what's coming, the speakers, the exhibitors, the talks, the different masterclasses throughout the day. It's going to be amazing. Really can't wait. So tell us a little bit about questions you've got for me, as I've got another few minutes before I need to finish. Have you got any questions for me on the topics that we've looked at this evening? Any burning questions or anything I can help you with in terms of that? I hope you haven't in some ways. It's been a very long week. But it's nice to know if you found Operation Respond useful and you've got some value from the talks that we've had this week. I'll be putting my slides up into the group. I know that you've had other people's slides this week as well. So again, you've got lots of information to go through. And because it's in the group, it lives in the group. There's nothing to stop you, obviously, showing your colleagues at another time any of the videos that are in the group, so that they can also gain the benefit from them. I'd particularly recommend that to you if you're owning a nursery and you want people to understand about safeguarding reforms. I thought that that could be, genuinely of benefit to everybody in the nursery management team, not just the owner. So no questions, no thoughts. You'll not give me a hard time on a Thursday night. You're all being too generous without any questions, which is absolutely fine and not a problem at all. So my question to you then: have you enjoyed Operation Respond? Has it been worthwhile? Shall we do it again next year? Find some different things we can pop on. Never entirely sure if these things work very well, to be fair. I'm sure if you weren't able to see me, you'd be telling me you couldn't see me. So I'm only certain I'm there. All right. Well, I will thank you very much for not giving me loads of questions, because it has been a very long week. If you do have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will see them in the coming hours and days and I will answer you directly. But yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you for being part of Operation Respond 2025. Hope to see some of you in Nottingham on the 13th of June for our one-day summit. And we hope to have made a difference so that you feel you'd like to see us do this again this time next year. All the best. Thank you very much. Good night.